She called my marina a glorified parking lot for old men. I owned every boat slip, fuel dock, and repair bay her daddy's company depended on. Well, her aunt's company. But I'll get to that. Tuesday at 10:20 a.m., I'm sitting in Priscilla Lockwood's office on the second floor of the Harbor Master building. Glass walls on three sides, overlooking 220 boat slips, a deep water fuel dock, and a certified repair facility that I have personally kept operational for 15 years. She hasn't looked up from her MacBook Pro. The chair I'm sitting in is about 2 inches lower than standard. I noticed. She had facilities swap out the original the week she arrived. Some people establish authority with competence. Priscilla uses furniture. Behind her left shoulder, Sandra Ward from HR is standing with a manila folder pressed against her chest like a shield. Sandra is 34 years old and studying the carpet like it contains instructions for surviving this meeting. Priscilla finishes typing something, probably the LinkedIn post. She looked up and gave me the smile. The one she practiced. The one that says, "I'm about to change your life, and I want you to know I feel great about it." Brent, I want to be transparent with you about where we are in the asset repositioning process. She folded her hands on the desk. Manicured fingers, not a callus on them. We've identified several friction points in the current operational model, and frankly, the marina in its current configuration represents legacy overhead that's inconsistent with where we're taking the brand. I didn't say anything. My hands were folded in my lap. I didn't move them. We're moving toward a curated waterfront experience, experiential revenue, events, private charters, wine and sale partnerships, the fuel dock, the repair bays. These are eyesores, Brent. They smell like diesel and they look like 1987. We need to optimize the footprint. She paused, waiting for me to argue. I didn't. Your role as Marina Operations Director is being eliminated effective today. Sandra has your separation paperwork. We're offering 2 weeks severance, which is generous given the restructuring context. She tilted her head, did the exhale through her nose. That little laugh she uses when she thinks someone's too simple to understand the big picture. I know change is hard, especially for people who've been doing the same thing for a long time. But this is what modernizing the brand looks like. Sandra Ward shifted her weight. She still hadn't looked up. Priscilla waited. I could hear the marina through the glass, a diesel engine idling at the fuel dock, the clang of a shackle against an aluminum mast somewhere down Sea Dock. Sounds I'd been hearing for 15 years. Sounds she'd just called eyesores. I unfolded my hands. I stood up. I picked up my coffee from the corner of her desk. I understand. Thank you. 4 words. That's all she got. I walked out, awked. Behind me, Sandra Ward exhaled through her nose. Not the same way Priscilla does it. Sandra's exhale was relief. The kind you hear when someone has been holding their breath during a conversation they wanted no part of. Priscilla was already typing again before I cleared the door. The LinkedIn post went up 11 minutes later. I know because Dale Cooper screenshot it and texted it to me before I'd reached the parking lot. The headline read, "Tough satisfying decisions and the courage to modernize." She used the hashtag curated experiences. But here's what Priscilla Lockwood didn't know, and what nobody in Lockwood Coastal Properties' current leadership had bothered to find out in over a decade. She didn't just fire her Marina Operations Director. She fired her landlord. My name is Brent Allen Summerfield. I'm 48 years old. I spent 10 years in the United States Navy as a boatswain's mate, separated at Petty Officer First Class, E6. If you don't know what a boatswain's mate does, I'll keep it simple. We handle lines, loads, rigging, and mooring systems. We manage small craft operations and pierside damage control. We're the people who keep the ship tied to the dock and the dock tied to the earth. We don't do it with theory. We do it with rope, steel, and knowing what breaks when you put weight on it wrong. After the Navy, I came ashore at 31 and started at Lockwood Coastal Properties 2 years later. I've been the Marina Operations Director for 15 years. I know every slip by number, every piling by age, every fuel line by pressure rating. I know which dock cleats were replaced in 2016 and which ones need replacing this October. I know the tide schedule for the next 90 days without checking a chart because I've been reading this water for a decade and a half, and the water doesn't change its mind based on a Stanford MBA's mood board. I've got a son, Cooper. He's 16, lives with me full-time. He plays JV baseball at Coastal High. Smart kid. Doesn't say much, but he notices everything. His mother is Diane Crawford now. We divorced 9 years ago, settled clean, lump sum property split. She kept the house in Pensacola. I kept the truck and the tools. No alimony. No drama. She chose to let Cooper live with me when he was 9. Not a court order. Her decision. I don't talk about it, and neither does she. Financially, I'm not what Priscilla assumed I was. No alimony payments hanging over my head. No mortgage I can't cover. I own my truck. I own my tools. And as it turns out, I own quite a bit more than that. If you've ever had a boss who walked in with a title she didn't earn and decided your life's work was an eyesore, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me tell you about those 15 years. In August of 2019, Hurricane Denton clipped the coast hard enough to destroy the fuel dock's primary pump system. Red snapper season was 10 days in. 14 charter boats running daily trips. Commercial guys pulling quota. Every one of them dependent on that fuel dock, because the nearest competing deepwater fuel facility is 40 miles up the coast. 40 miles. That's not an inconvenience. That's a death sentence for a charter operation running on tight margins and tighter schedules. I spent 72 straight hours on site. I ran temporary fuel lines from the reserve tank to a portable pump station I rigged on the end of B-dock using hardware. I pulled from the repair facility's inventory. I didn't sleep. I didn't go home. I ate gas station sandwiches and drank vending machine coffee that tasted like someone had filtered it through a boat battery. Dale Cooper, my lead tech, 11 years under me. Coast Guard Master Technician certified. He was right there the whole time. We kept every charter boat fueled, every commercial vessel running. Lockwood Coastal Properties lost 0 bookings, 0 canceled charters during peak season. $17 million in annual charter and commercial fishing revenue kept flowing because 2 guys who smelled like diesel and looked like 1987 knew what the hell they were doing. Nobody sent a thank you email. That's fine, I didn't do it for the email. Christmas Eve, 3 years back. A 58-foot sport fisher in slip 114 took on water. Owner was in Savannah. Vessel was going down at the stern. Dale and I pulled an all-nighter pumping her out, patching a through-hull fitting that had corroded past its service life. We saved a $900,000 boat on a night when every other human being in the organization was drinking eggnog and pretending the Marina ran itself. But here's the one that stays with me. Cooper's 8th grade graduation, 2 years ago. He was walking across that stage in the gymnasium at Coastal Middle, and I was in the parking lot of the repair facility on the phone with a marine insurance adjuster because a crane malfunction during a scheduled haul-out had created a liability situation that required my specific certification to legally clear. I couldn't hand it off. Nobody else had the credentials. Cooper saw me through the window from the stage. He told me later he could see my truck in the lot across the street. He could see me pacing with the phone against my ear. Neither of us has mentioned it since. We don't need to. He knows. I know. That's enough. And that's worse. I'm not telling you this so you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this so you understand what 15 years of holding a place together actually looks like. It doesn't look like a LinkedIn post. It looks like missed graduations and diesel fuel under your fingernails at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning. Now, let me tell you about the part Priscilla never bothered to learn. 12 years ago, a man named Gerald Haas, everybody called him Jerry, filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Jerry was the original owner of the Marina's physical infrastructure, the slips, the fuel dock, the repair facility. all 220 slips, the deep water fuel dock, and the certified repair bays. Jerry had built most of it himself over 30 years, and when his finances collapsed, the whole package went to auction as part of the bankruptcy estate. Lockwood Coastal Properties was offered right of first refusal on the asset. Catherine Lockwood, the actual owner, the woman who built the business over 32 years, she passed. The price was $2.1 million, and she didn't want the capital exposure. Fair enough. Her call. I called Ray Mitchell that same afternoon. Ray and I served together at Naval Station Mayport. Same pier crew. He separated 2 years before I did, went to law school on the GI Bill, and built a practice in maritime and real estate law, waterfront property, commercial leases, LLC structures. That's Ray's world. We've had a standing lunch every third Tuesday for longer than I can remember. Ray doesn't waste words. Neither do I. That's why we get along. I told him the Marina was on the open market. I told him the price. I told him Lockwood had passed. There was a pause. Then Ray said 5 sentences that changed everything. Buy it yourself. File it under an LLC. Lease it back to them at market rate. You can always assign it later, but only assign it if you want to. So I did. I formed Summerfield Marine Holdings, LLC. I put down $340,000 in personal savings. Every dollar I'd put away since separation from the Navy. I financed the rest through a regional marine lender. I purchased the entire marina asset, all 220 boat slips, the deep water fuel dock, and the certified repair facility at the bankruptcy auction. Then I leased it all back to Lockwood Coastal Properties under a master lease agreement. Market rate, documented, notarized, filed with the county recorder's office. Everything clean, everything legal, everything in plain sight for anyone who cared to look. Nobody looked. The lease auto-renewed every 3 years. It renewed 3 times without a single amendment. Nobody in Lockwood's current leadership ever read it. Nobody asked. The document sat in the original acquisition files, buried under a decade of personnel changes and organizational amnesia. But Ray Mitchell read it. Ray Mitchell wrote it. And there's a clause in Section 14C of that master lease agreement, the property manager removal clause, that says something very specific. In the event the lessee's designated property manager is removed, terminated, or otherwise separated from his operational role by the lessee without mutual written consent of the lessor reserves the right to initiate immediate lease termination proceedings with 48 hours written notice. In plain English, if Lockwood fires me, I can pull the lease on the entire marina, every slip, the fuel dock, the repair facility, all of it. 48 hours notice. Ray had insisted on that clause 12 years ago. I remember asking him if it was necessary. He looked at me the way he looks at people when they've said something disappointing. Brent, you're leasing your own property back to people who will eventually forget you own it. Protect yourself. That's not paranoia. That's seamanship. So when Priscilla Lockwood sat behind that glass desk at 10:20 a.m. on a Tuesday and told me my marina was a glorified parking lot for old men, I folded my hands. I listened to every word. I stood up. I picked up my coffee. I understand. Thank you. And I walked out of that building with the same composure I learned on a pier at 0300 in a squall, when the lines are screaming, and the only thing keeping people alive is the guy who doesn't panic. I didn't panic. I walked to my truck. I set my coffee in the cup holder. I pulled out of the lot and drove 6 blocks to the diner on Harbor Street, the one with the vinyl booths and the waitress who's been there since before I started at Lockwood. I sat down. I ordered black coffee. I took out my phone. I called Ray Mitchell. He picked up on the second ring. They did it, I said. 2-second pause. Tuesday at 10:20? Tuesday at 10:20. I'll have the notice drafted by tomorrow morning. Certified mail, return receipt. Delivered to Lockwood's registered business address and Catherine Lockwood personally. 48 hours from delivery. That's the clause. That's the clause. I hung up. I drank my coffee. The waitress refilled it without asking. Outside the window, I could see the tops of the mast lights down at the harbor. My harbor, my slips, my fuel dock, my repair bays. The Marina Priscilla Lockwood had just fired me from didn't belong to Priscilla Lockwood. It didn't belong to Catherine Lockwood. It didn't belong to Lockwood Coastal Properties. It belonged to Summerfield Marine Holdings, LLC. It belonged to me. If you've ever had a boss who fired you from a building you owned, hit that like button and subscribe. Tuesday afternoon, I drove home. Cooper was at practice. The house was quiet. Rex was waiting at the door, tail going, the way he always does when I come home at the wrong time. Dogs know. They always know. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send any emails. I didn't draft any statements or write any posts about tough decisions and the courage to modernize. I opened a beer. I scratched Rex behind the ears, and I waited. That's the part people don't understand about patience. It's not passive. It's a decision. Every minute you don't react is a minute you're choosing precision over noise. I learned that on a pier at Naval Station Mayport, in the middle of a squall with 3 lines about to part and a chief screaming in my ear. You don't move until you know where the load is going. Then you move once. And you move right. Wednesday morning, I got up at 5:30 the way I always do. Made coffee. Made Cooper breakfast. Drove him to school. Came home. Sat on the back deck with Rex and watched the water. My phone buzzed once around 9 a.m. Text from Dale Cooper. Place is weird today. She's already measuring the repair bays for some kind of wine tent. I read it. I didn't respond. At 11:15 a.m., another text from Dale. Talked to 3 charter captains on B-Dock. They're asking where you are. What do I tell them? I typed back 2 words. Tell them nothing. That was my only communication with anyone at Lockwood Coastal Properties on Wednesday. I didn't call Catherine. I didn't call Sandra Ward. I didn't call Priscilla to argue or beg or explain why firing the guy who owns the marina from the marina he owns might be a strategic miscalculation. None of that was my job anymore. Priscilla had made her decision. Now I'd make mine. Wednesday evening, Ray Mitchell called. Not to ask how I was doing. Ray doesn't do that. Notice is drafted. Certified mail and personal delivery, both. Goes out tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Catherine Lockwood will receive her copy by hand courier. The registered business address gets certified mail with return receipt. Clock starts on delivery. Good. Once it's delivered, they have 48 hours to respond. But there's nothing to respond to, Brent. The clause is clear. The lease terminates. They vacate or they're trespassing on your property. I know. You okay with this? I looked out the kitchen window. Cooper was in the backyard, throwing a baseball against the pitchback net I'd set up for him 3 years ago. Rex was lying in the grass, watching the ball go back and forth. The sun was going down behind the tree line, and everything was quiet and gold. Yeah, Ray, I'm okay with this. Good. Get some sleep. Click. Thursday at 9 a.m., Ray Mitchell's office sent 2 packages. One via hand courier to Catherine Lockwood's home address. One via certified mail with return receipt to Lockwood Coastal Properties registered business address on Harbor Boulevard. Both contained identical documents. A formal lease termination notice from Summerfield Marine Holdings, LLC, citing Section 14C of the Master Lease Agreement, referencing the involuntary termination of the designated property manager on Tuesday at 10:20 a.m., and initiating immediate lease termination proceedings with 48 hours written notice. The letter was 3 pages. The language was precise. Ray doesn't waste words on paper any more than he wastes them in person. The key paragraph read, pursuant to Section 14, C. Of the master lease agreement executed between Summerfield Marine Holdings, LLC, and Lockwood Coastal Properties, dated 12 years prior, filed with the County Recorder's Office, and auto-renewed without amendment on 3 subsequent occasions, the lessor hereby provides formal notice of lease termination, effective 48 hours from the date and time of confirmed delivery of this notice. The lessee is directed to cease all commercial operations on the leased premises and vacate all structures, equipment, and personnel from the property within the termination window. Attached to the notice, a certified copy of the original master lease agreement, a certified copy of Section 14C, the Property Manager Removal Clause, the LLC Articles of Organization for Summerfield Marine Holdings, the County Recorder's Deed of Sale from the Haas bankruptcy estate, and 3 notarized lease renewal documents, none of which contained any modification to Section 14C. Every piece of paper was clean. Every signature was original or certified. Every filing was current. Ray Mitchell had been holding this file for 12 years, the way a good bosun holds a line, neatly coiled, ready to deploy, waiting for the load. Thursday at 9:47 a.m., Catherine Lockwood opened the courier envelope. I know the exact time because that's when my phone started ringing. The first call came at 9:47 a.m. Catherine Lockwood. I looked at the screen. I set the phone face down on the kitchen table. Rex looked up from his spot by the back door. I took a sip of coffee. The phone rang again at 9:52. Again at 9:58. At 10:14, a text from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "Mr. Summerfield, this is Margaret Cleary from Lockwood Coastal Properties Legal Office. Please contact us immediately regarding a lease matter. This is urgent." I read it. I set the phone down. At 10:31, Catherine called again. At 10:45, Dale Cooper texted me. "Something is happening. Catherine just showed up in person. Priscilla is in her office with the door closed. There's a woman from legal I've never seen before going through filing cabinets in the admin building." "What did you do?" I typed back 3 words. "Read your lease." At 11:20 a.m., my phone rang. This time it was a number I recognized. Sandra Ward, the HR representative who'd stood behind Priscilla's left shoulder studying the carpet 2 days earlier. I let it ring. At 12:07 p.m., Catherine Lockwood called again. At 12:15, she left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it until that evening. When I did, her voice sounded like someone who'd been punched in the stomach 45 minutes ago and was just now remembering to breathe. "Brent, it's Catherine. I need you to call me back. I just received a document from a law firm representing an LLC that, Brent, I didn't know. I need to understand what's happening. Please call me." She didn't know. That was the truth. Catherine Lockwood had built her business over 32 years. She'd signed the original master lease agreement herself. But that was 12 years ago. And in the decades since, she'd been running the commercial side, events, partnerships, branding, while I ran the Marina. The lease had auto-renewed 3 times without amendment. It was a piece of paper in a filing cabinet that nobody in her current operation had touched since the last personnel turnover in the admin office. Catherine didn't know, because Catherine never needed to know. I kept the Marina running. The lease payments processed automatically. The facility was maintained to Coast Guard certification standards. There was no reason for anyone to pull that file. Until Priscilla decided that 15 years of operational expertise was legacy dead weight, and 220 boat slips were an eyesore. Thursday afternoon, the calls kept coming. By 3 p.m., I'd received 11 calls from 4 different numbers. Catherine, Margaret Cleary from legal, Sandra Ward, and one from a number that, when I checked it later, belonged to Priscilla Lockwood's personal cell. That one I almost admired. Almost. Priscilla's text arrived at 3:22 p.m. It read, "Brent, I think there's been a misunderstanding about some paperwork. I'd love to sit down and discuss this like professionals. Let me know when you're free. Like professionals. She fired me 50 hours ago using the phrase legacy overhead, and now she wanted to sit down like professionals. I didn't respond. By Friday morning, the calls had multiplied. Dale texted me at 7:30 a.m. Charter captains on B dock and C dock are talking. Word got out about the lease. Captain Jim Harwood is asking if his slip agreement is still valid. 3 other operators called the office, and nobody could give them an answer. Priscilla tried to hold a meeting with the commercial tenants yesterday afternoon. She used the phrase experiential transition, and Captain Harwood walked out. Good. Jim Harwood has run charters out of Slip 87 for 9 years. He's not a man who responds well to the phrase experiential transition. Friday at 2 p.m., Margaret Cleary, Lockwood's outside counsel, filed a response to Ray Mitchell's termination notice. Ray forwarded it to me with a 2-word assessment. No merit. Their argument was that the property manager designation in Section 14C was ambiguous and didn't specifically name Brent Summerfield. Ray's response, filed at 4:30 p.m. that same day, included 3 exhibits. The original lease execution document listing Brent Allen Summerfield as the designated property manager, the LLC's operating agreement naming Brent Allen Summerfield as sole managing member, and 12 years of Lockwood's own internal personnel records identifying Brent Allen Summerfield as Marina Operations Director. Ambiguous. Sure. Friday at 6:15 p.m., Catherine Lockwood's 23rd call came in. I was sitting on the back deck. Cooper was inside doing homework. Rex was at my feet. The phone lit up on the arm of my chair. I looked at it. I looked at the water. The sun was dropping behind the marina. My marina. And the light was catching the mast tips of 40-some sailboats lined up along A dock like a row of silver needles against an orange sky. I picked up the phone. I held it for 2 rings. Then I set it back down. Click. Not the click of answering, the click of deciding. 23 missed calls, 4 voicemails, 2 legal filings, 1 text message from a 29-year-old Stanford MBA who wanted to discuss things like professionals after calling my life's work a glorified parking lot for old men. And I was sitting on my back deck, drinking black coffee, watching the sun go down over property that had my name on the deed. Sometimes patience doesn't look like strength. It looks like a man not picking up his phone. But every second of silence was a sentence I didn't need to say. The 48-hour window was closing. Lockwood had no legal standing, no amended lease, and no leverage. Margaret Cleary knew it. Catherine knew it. And somewhere in that glass-walled office on the 2nd floor of the Harbor Master building, sitting behind a desk she'd had facilities lower to make herself feel tall, Priscilla Lockwood was starting to understand that the parking lot she'd tried to bulldoze had an owner, and the owner wasn't answering her calls. The following Monday at 8 a.m., I pulled into the gravel lot at Harborview Marine Group, 6 miles up the coast, 180 slips, clean operation, older facility, but maintained the way a facility should be maintained, by people who understand that function isn't an aesthetic choice, it's a structural requirement. Frank Ellis was standing next to his truck when I got there. 10-year-old pickup that smelled like 30-weight oil and salt air. He had a cup of black coffee in his hand and another one sitting on the tailgate. He handed it to me without a word. We stood there for about 30 seconds, looking out at his harbor. "You bring the paperwork?" he said. "Ray's bringing it at 9. Frank nodded. Took a sip. "I've wanted your fuel dock access for 10 years, Brent. You know that." "I know. And your charter relationships." "I know that too." He looked at me. Frank Ellis is 67 years old. He's been in the marine business since he was 22. He doesn't use words like experiential revenue or curated waterfront experience. He uses words like draft, displacement, and net operating income. We understood each other the way 2 people understand each other when they've both spent decades keeping boats in the water and water out of the boats. 15-year master lease, he said. Market rate, plus 4% of gross fuel revenue. I had my attorney draw it up Friday. Ray will want to read it. I'd be worried if he didn't. Ray arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. He parked next to my truck, walked over with a leather portfolio under his arm, the same one he's carried since law school, and shook Frank's hand. The three of us went inside to Frank's office. Wood-paneled walls, marine charts, a framed photo of a Boston whaler from 1986 that Frank still keeps in a covered slip on the far end of his property. The office smelled like old coffee and diesel, like a place where work gets done. Ray read Frank's lease offer line by line. Took 40 minutes. He made 2 minor amendments to the insurance indemnification language and 1 adjustment to the fuel dock maintenance responsibility schedule. Frank agreed to all 3 without negotiation. At 11:30 a.m., I signed a 15-year master lease with Harborview Marine Group. Summerfield Marine Holdings, LLC would relocate its primary commercial operations, all 220 slips worth of tenant relationships, the deep water fuel dock equipment, and the certified repair facility's portable assets, to Harborview's expanded footprint. Frank had already begun site preparation for the additional slip capacity the week before. He'd known this was coming. I hadn't called him. He'd called me. Thursday afternoon, 6 hours after the eviction notice went out. Word travels fast on the water. It always has. Ray filed the new lease with the county recorder that afternoon. Clean, notarized, executed. Done. I drove home. Cooper was at school. Rex was at the door. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone, and I did something I hadn't done in 5 days. I listened to Catherine Lockwood's voicemails, all 4 of them. The first one, from Thursday at 12:15 p.m., I'd already heard. The punched-in-the-stomach voice, the confusion, the please call me. The second one, from Friday morning, was different, quieter, more controlled. She'd had time to read the lease. Brent, I've reviewed the master lease agreement with Margaret Cleary. I understand the clause. I understand the position. I want you to know that I did not authorize what happened on Tuesday. I didn't know until it was done. That doesn't excuse it. But I need to talk to you. Please. The third one, from Friday evening, right around the time I'd set the phone down on the arm of my deck chair for the 23rd time, was the shortest. Brent, please. 2 words. I could hear 32 years of building something in those 2 words. I could hear a woman who'd started with a single waterfront lease and a catering permit realizing that the niece she'd trusted with the future of her company had just handed the keys to a competitor. The 4th voicemail was from Saturday morning. Catherine's voice was flat, professional. The emotion was gone. She'd passed through the other side of it. Brent, I've retained outside counsel independent of Margaret Cleary. I've initiated an internal review of Priscilla's hiring authority, her termination decisions, and her operational mandate. The board-level partners have been notified. I expect a formal consultation within the week. I would still like to speak with you when you're ready. You have my number. You've always had my number. I set the phone down. I poured 3 fingers of bourbon, not the daily drinker. The bottle Ray had given me 2 Christmases ago that I kept on the top shelf behind the coffee mugs. I sat at that kitchen table and I drank it slow. I didn't call her back. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because there was nothing left to discuss. The lease was terminated. The new lease was signed. The infrastructure belonged to Summerfield Marine Holdings, and Summerfield Marine Holdings had a new commercial partner. Every conversation Catherine Lockwood wanted to have was a conversation that should have happened before her niece decided that 15 years of expertise was a friction point. The charter fleet moved fast. Within 10 days of my signing with Harborview, the first operators started transferring their slip agreements. Captain Jim Harwood was first. Slip 87 at Lockwood became Slip 22 at Harborview. He called me on the day he moved his boat and said 4 words. Should have been sooner. By 30 days after my signing, 11 of 14 commercial operators had transferred to Harborview. 11 charter and commercial fishing operations, pulling their vessels, their fuel accounts, their repair contracts, and their booking relationships out of Lockwood Coastal Properties and into a facility managed by the same man who'd kept them running for 15 years. They didn't follow a building. They followed the person who answered the phone at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve, when their boat was taking on water. Clients follow the people they trust. That's not a business theory. That's a fact as old as the water. Lockwood Coastal Properties lost $4.3 million in contracted bookings within 60 days. Canceled or transferred. Gone. The fuel dock sat empty. The repair bays sat dark. The 220 slips started emptying out, one by one, as commercial tenants exercised their own termination clauses, most of which had 30-day exit windows that Priscilla had never read. The curated waterfront experience was a waterfront with no boats. 16 days after the eviction notice, Lockwood's 4 remaining board-level partners held a formal consultation. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Ray heard the results from a colleague who handled one of the partners' personal legal affairs. The vote was 4-0, unanimous. Terminate Priscilla Lockwood's appointment as Director of Experience and Revenue Optimization, effective immediately. Catherine did it herself, 18 days after the eviction notice. I heard about it from Dale Cooper, who was still technically employed at the old facility during the transition. Dale's text was 5 words. She cleaned out her office. No LinkedIn post this time. No hashtag about the courage to modernize. No exhale through the nose or tilted head. Priscilla Lockwood walked out of the Harbor Master building on a Wednesday afternoon, carrying a single box, and the security guard who held the door for her was the same one who'd watched me walk out 18 days earlier with nothing but a cup of coffee. I read Dale's text. I set the phone down. I went outside and threw batting practice for Cooper in the backyard until the light was gone. That Thursday evening, I finally called Catherine Lockwood. She picked up on the first ring. Brent. Catherine. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. I could hear something in the background. A clock, maybe. Or the hum of an empty house where a husband is sick and a business is bleeding, and the person you trusted most just proved you right about the wrong relative. I let family cloud my business judgment, she said. I owe you an apology. Not because of the lease, because of what she said to you in that office. About the Marina. About your work. That was unconscionable. It was. I should have read the lease, Brent. I should have read it 12 years ago, and every year after. Yeah? You should have. Another pause. Is there any path back? I looked out the window. Cooper was at the kitchen counter reading something for school. Rex was under the table. The bourbon bottle was still on the counter from Monday, 1 drink lighter. No, Catherine, there isn't. I understand. I know you do. That was it. I didn't need to explain. She didn't need to ask again. 2 people who understood what had been lost because someone with 13 months of hospitality consulting experience and a furniture trick decided that competence was an eyesore. I hung up. I put the phone in my pocket. I walked into the kitchen. Hey, Coop. He looked up from his book. I'm coming to your game, Saturday. He studied me for a second, the way he does. Quiet, noticing everything. You said that last time. I know. This time I'm coming. He nodded. Went back to his book, but the corner of his mouth moved. Just a little. Just enough. Saturday morning, I sat in the bleachers at Coastal High's JV field. 3rd row behind the home dugout. Cooper was playing second base. The sun was out. The field smelled like cut grass and infield dirt. I had a coffee in one hand and my phone in my pocket, and my phone did not ring once in 9 innings. Cooper went 2 for 3 with a double to right center in the 5th. He looked at the bleachers when he pulled into second base. Just a glance. Just long enough to see me there. I was there. That evening, I sat on the back deck with 3 fingers of bourbon and Rex at my feet. The sun was going down over the water, not over Lockwood's Marina, not over Harborview's Marina, just over the water. The same water I'd been reading for 15 years. The water doesn't care who owns the dock. It just keeps moving, the way it always has. My phone buzzed. One text. From Dale Cooper. Harborview's looking good. When do I start? I typed back 2 words. Monday morning. I set the phone down. I leaned back. Rex shifted his weight against my ankle. The last light caught the tops of the trees, and then it was gone, and everything was quiet. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It arrives on a certified letter, filed with the county recorder, delivered with a return receipt. And sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is sit on his own deck, drinking his own bourbon, watching the sun go down over water that doesn't belong to anyone, and know that the people who mistook his silence for weakness just lost everything he built. Because buildings don't make a marina. People do. And if you fire the person who held it all together, don't be surprised when the whole thing comes apart in your hands. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.